Welcome back to yet another 3-round NFL mock draft with trades. I'm really excited to bring you this mock draft because I've been working on it for a long time. We've officially entered what is known as lying season when it comes to the NFL draft rumors, but a lot of the stuff that you've heard prior to this probably has some kind of substance to it. I've taken into consideration as many of the rumors as I could and compiled them into a mock draft with trades. I've got everything in this from the Dolphins tanking for 2020 to Josh Rosen being traded. So does that mean that I agree with some of these moves or all of these moves? Not exactly, but I'm going for accuracy here with a little bit of personal opinion sprinkled in there. The trades in this mock are based on meeting equal value from the NFL's draft pick trade chart. Equal value means that the team moving down isn't being blown away by this offer, but rather than have a team I'm projecting to trade up sacrifice their entire draft just for the sake of this mock, I'm showing the floor of what I think they could get for this move, and any additional picks involved probably wouldn't impact this mock either way, so chill on the compensation complaints like I didn't do my research. One thing that I can promise you is that I spent more time researching each pick in the third round of this mock draft than most people spend on the first round picks of their latest mock draft. When I say I dove deep into these picks, I went really deep. I looked at every single team's pre-draft visits with certain prospects and made sure that almost every single pick in this draft, a team has met with the player that they've been assigned at some point during the pre-draft process. So if you're mad that I gave your team a certain player, don't be mad at me because you're not interested in this player. Be mad at your team because they're the ones that have actually shown some sort of significant interest in these players. It might not be a top 30 visit, but they have met with them at some point leading up to this mock draft. So let's make a deal here. If this isn't one of the most well-researched mock drafts you've ever seen, feel free to hit that dislike button and leave a shitty comment below. But if it is a well-researched mock draft, then you have got to hit the like button and you've got to subscribe to the channel. Let's try to get this mock draft to top my last one, which blew up with over 160,000 views. The goal for this mock is 3,000 likes. I know that's lofty, but you guys have been able to pull through when I've needed your support the most, so I'm going out on a limb here. But enough pregame talk, let's get right into this mock draft. It still blows my mind every single time that I hear Kyler Murray is going to end up being the #1 overall pick. If you still don't believe the rumors about Kyler Murray being the first overall pick, then you probably also believe Jamal Adams when he said the picture of the Jets leaked uniforms was photoshopped too. I'm still not a fan of them moving on from Josh Rosen after just a year, but I have a scenario later on in this draft that I think would make this move a lot easier for everybody to digest because it would just make a lot more sense. Stay tuned. The 49ers are up to no good over there. Everybody thinks they've got the top 5 of the draft nailed down, and I have a feeling that the 49ers are going to ruin every mock draft with a sneaky trade down like they did the last time they held the #2 overall pick and convinced the Bears that they needed to move up one spot to secure Mitchell Trubisky. And they don't care that the Jets are desperate to move down because they don't have a second rounder, even though it would be conveniently easy for us to mock that scenario happening. Because of the cost, I just couldn't come up with a scenario, nor have I heard of any trade rumors for them to be actually trading down, so I'm sticking with the safe pick here in Nick Bosa. I read this week that the D Ford contract can be opted out after a year and they can let him walk. I'm not sure if they'd still get a compensatory pick. I think that they would, but if they ended up with a 3rd round comp pick, then dropping down 1 round from the 2nd rounder they traded for a year rental really doesn't seem that bad. And maybe if the Raiders can be coerced to jump up for Nick Bosa and part with another one of those 1st round picks, I could see them moving down, even if the 49ers have to part with more day 2 or 3 picks to make it work. But for now, Nick Bosa is locked in. With the 49ers and Jets campaigning for a trade down so publicly, I'm leaning more and more towards the idea that they won't actually be able to find a suitor because nobody wants to give up that much draft capital in such a deep draft. If someone is willing to give up a 2020 first rounder, then maybe they make a move, but it's already damn near impossible to predict a draft trade with current picks. When you involve future picks in scenarios, you're just throwing things at a wall for shits and gigs. We'll get to that later. I'm continuing to stick with the safe scenario here and giving the Jets Kentucky edge rusher Josh Allen. I'm so ready for the Josh Allen versus Josh Allen Bills-Jets matchups headlining the AFC East rivalries long after Tom Brady retires. If none of the top 3 teams can find a trade down scenario, the Raiders are probably to blame. They've got the most draft capital and would be able to undercut the market value if they wanted to just to get a deal done. I actually think that if one of the 3 guys that's already been drafted in this mock draft falls to #4, that guy is going to be the pick. That's right, even Kyler Murray. With them off the board, Quinnen Williams becomes the top option left, and the Raiders need solid building blocks rather than risky ones. They can make some moves with their later 1st round picks And it's funny because I think that Quinnen Williams and an extra first or second round pick is what the 49ers and Jets truly want, but they don't want to trade with anyone but the Raiders so that they can secure him at number 4. While the Raiders are probably hoping to pique the Giants' interest in moving up for Dwayne Haskins so that they can move down 2 picks and possibly steal at least the Giants' second round pick. And I know what you guys are probably thinking. Are there going to be any trades in this mock draft with trades? Guys, just bear with me because this mock draft is about to get wild. The Bucs have basically come out and said that Devin White is their guy after losing Quan Alexander in free agency. It could be the teams are just being this transparent in 2019, or it could be them holding Devin White on a stick for teams to come and get. In my last mock draft with trades, I stated that I thought Devin White is the non-quarterback in this draft that teams could fall in love with the potential here, see him as a future all-pro to build their defense around, so the Bucs are doing the right thing here. They're already going to be getting a ton of trade offers to move down from the teams that want Dwayne Haskins, just in case the Giants actually want to take him at number 6. If the Bucs wanted to trade down and still fill the need at linebacker, there's a chance that they can move down a few picks, and if they didn't get Devin White, there's another linebacker named Devin Bush, and it's likely that they'd end up with one of the two. But once again, the price for these top 5 picks is too rich for non-quarterbacks. There's so much depth in this draft that unless a team is madly and truly and deeply in love with one specific player, teams are going to weigh the value of these extra picks versus a player they evaluate as a slightly higher or lesser ability, such as the Devins at linebacker. Why am I going to give up a second and potentially third round pick for Devin White when I could wait and possibly get Devin Bush without having to sacrifice as much draft capital? Now here's where things get interesting. Redskins owner Dan Snyder is petty enough to risk everything to climb up in front of the Giants and grab Dwayne Haskins out from underneath him. But it's actually a pretty smart move when I thought about it. The Redskins will be able to move on from both high-priced, below-average quarterbacks next year on their roster and clear up a ton of cap space. And everybody always raves about how the method to winning in today's NFL is to get a loaded roster around a quarterback on a rookie contract. Well, Haskins will give the Redskins one more prove-it year with Jay Gruden, which will ultimately fail, and then they cut ties with him, Alex Smith, and Case Keenum. They would have a ton of cap space and a relatively good roster and an attractive young quarterback to work with, which could in turn lure a legitimate coaching candidate. I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about that. What would end up being the kicker for the Redskins moving up in front of the Giants for Dwayne Haskins is that I'm beginning to think that the Giants legitimately won't draft Haskins even if he's here at number 6. Yeah, I could have had the Giants trade up with the Raiders and draft Dwayne Haskins, but this mock is the draft rumors edition, and the rumor out there is that the Giants are searching for an impact defender with the 6th overall pick, so I guess I'll entertain the idea since I've given them Dwayne Haskins in basically every other mock draft that I've done so far. Now, if they truly don't like Haskins, then I get it. Don't waste a top 10 pick on a quarterback you don't believe in. But if they think that one of these other quarterbacks in this class have more potential in their scheme, then we've got to start questioning their evaluation of talent altogether. If they pass on Haskins, then just wait until next year for Tua or Justin Herbert or somebody else. Don't settle for Daniel Jones and try to sell the fan base on Andy Dalton 2.0. The lack of talent on the Giants' hybrid defense makes it harder to predict who they'd value here. This is a franchise that's used to be known for their linebacker play, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have them pass on a guy like Rashawn Gary, and I'm going to have them select LSU Devin White. They apparently loved Devin White at the Combine, but I think the pairing would be great and allow them to build around some players on defense instead of focusing so much on their offense. The Jaguars are actually too damn boring to take a risk and get involved with these trades, but it makes sense because they don't want to risk the top guy on their board that would fill a huge need slip past their fingers when they could just play it safe and take him here at number 7. The next team that I have trading up in the top 10 is too far down the board for the guy that the Jaguars want to fall past quite a few of the offensive line needy teams, and I think the Jaguars are about to invest heavily on offense to make sure that Nick Foles is successful, so just get the guy that you want all along the offensive line, and for me it would be Jonah Williams, but I think that the Jaguars really have a thing for Jawan Taylor, and he would fit that power running scheme, assuming that Leonard Fournette is still back in 2019. But Jawan Taylor is a massive mauler that could play right tackle for them, which is just what they need. The Lions actually did a pretty good job of filling their needs via free agency, or at least getting some stopgap options for the 2019 season. Even though they spent big money on Trey Flowers to play defensive end, give me Brian Burns here, or even local product Devin Bush personally. And I'm not sure how much Matt Patricia is involved in the draft process for the Lions, but I'm going to assume that after watching Bill Belichick manipulate trades up and down the draft board, that he's probably going to overthink this here, and when a team presents an interesting offer to trade down, he's going to take it. Well, the team that I have moving up here has traditionally been an aggressive team in the draft when there is a a player that they really want. You're going to hear me refer to their guy a lot. And that would be the Atlanta Falcons, with the most memorable time being when they stole Julio Jones right from underneath the Browns. The word on these draft streets this year is that they are really high on Ed Oliver, and I don't mean high on him like they're overreacting from his pro day, but they've seen him as a fit in this defense all along, especially with the contract dispute with Grady Jarrett. You don't know if he's going to be there long term or not. Ed Oliver would provide instant impact to their defense as a rotational guy with Grady Jarrett, and they are going to be all in on this season because they've got such a talented roster still. But Ed Oliver would give them a dynamic 3 technique and allow Grady Jarrett to move on in free agency probably next year, unless they come to some really team-friendly deal within the next year. The Bills are going to be a key in how the rest of the first round plays out. 3 out of the 4 teams picking after them have needs at quarterback, so they could see themselves with a ton of trade offers if in fact Haskins and Locke are both still available in real life. However, I haven't made a mock with DK Metcalf as the pick here yet, and I would be foolish to ignore their interest in him. This is my favorite place for DK Metcalf to land because I'd love to pair him with that cannon attached to Josh Allen's shoulder. The Bills are one of the teams that has already met with DK Metcalf, one of the few teams honestly, and while it's not the safest pick, the safe pick I made in the last draft with Jonah Williams here, I think that this could really pay off for them in the long run. They've dedicated this offseason to improving the weapons and the offensive line around Josh Allen, and I think they continue to do that through the draft. John Elway always seems to get his guy, and that's been Drew Lock since the Senior Bowl. The latest rumor is that Drew Lock is actually going to be picked ahead of Dwayne Haskins, which I wouldn't be completely shocked by because I've been a fan of Lock's arm for a while. I really like the idea of that arm cutting through the altitude at Mile High with deep jump balls to Cortland Sutton. I think I've given the Broncos Drew Lock in almost every mock draft, so I'm sure they're going to end up picking like Devin Bush here because that's just how it goes. And remember when I said it was lying season? All of a sudden the latest rumor is that the Broncos don't want to put any pressure on Joe Flacco with a first round quarterback. I'm calling BS on that one, and if that's the case, get John Elway out of there next year because this guy does not know how to play the game, and he is running this offense and this franchise into the ground. The Bengals finally moved on from Vontaze Burfict, and it's time to replace his quote-unquote leadership with an actual leader. Devin Bush would be a really safe pick for the Bengals to play alongside Malik Jefferson for the future, and safe is kind of on brand for the Bengals, but when I hear Dwayne Haskins is dropping on boards, this is kind of his floor to me. There's probably so many Buckeyes fans that would dust off their old Bengals jerseys if the team just happened to draft Haskins. The Packers went in on defense in free agency, so everybody thinks that they go pass catcher here at number 12. And I'd like to say that I had DK Metcalf being the surprise pick to the Packers in my last mock, way before all these Mel Kipers of the world started showing up with DK Metcalf at number 12 for them too. I'm shifting back to defense for them here, with one of my favorite prospects still on the board, and kind of a different edge rusher from the 2 that they signed in free agency. Brian Burns is most certainly more of a bendy speed rusher than the power rush that the Smith Bros will offer. The flexibility that these 3 could give a defense would be incredible, and I'm just not sold on this team drafting TJ Hawkinson this early, which has been a really popular choice in a lot of mocks I've seen recently. Hawkinson's good, don't get me wrong, but this draft is loaded at tight end, and the position just isn't one that gets a top 15 pick spent on it very often, especially when the guy doesn't have sort of freakish athletic ability, and Hawkinson doesn't blow me out of the water. The Dolphins are going to tank for the 2020 season. The owner basically admitted it, and the moves in free agency have only reinforced that idea. While new head coach Brian Flores has denied that his team will be tanking for 2019, I wouldn't expect the leader of 53 men to admit something like that. Tanking in the NFL is way more of a front office approach than it is the coaches and the players. The Dolphins are going to trade down and collect 2020 picks as per plan, so that they've got the ammunition to move up in the 2020 draft if necessary. The 2019 season is basically a tryout for this team moving forward, and I honestly respect the long-term vision here. This is a smart move. There is a top 10 player still on the board, and the Texans have such a glaring need at the position that I think they would consider trading a 2020 pick to move up in this scenario. Jonah Williams might be a franchise left tackle, and he might not be, but he's going to be a starting something along the offensive line for a decade, and would give the Texans at least one technically sound offensive line to protect poor Deshaun Watson. The Texans need to jump ahead while they're still on Watson's rookie contract, so not having to part with a future first would make this trade up key. After trading up for Ed Oliver, the Lions are back on the clock. The beauty of a trade down scenario like this for the Lions is that they can now afford just to take the best player available on their board and not focus on needs as much. But they're going to find themselves in a position to draft the best player at a position of a relative need and then turn it into a position of strength. Darius Slay is one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and the Lions did spend big money on a slot free agent, but Byron Murphy would give the Lions secondary some real flexibility to run the complex schemes that Matt Patricia wants to employ. And they're going to get another shot at getting another really good player at number 45 overall. Now remember, the Redskins traded up, so that means the Buccaneers are on the clock. And the Buccaneers are in a similar winning situation as the Lions here with this trade down. Give me 2 players in the top 50, especially with one still being a top 15 player in this draft over a single top 10 player. And a lot of the defenders that they have brought in and are looking at drafting at number 5 overall are still on the board at number 15. Bruce Arians brought along his friend Todd Bowles to be the defensive coordinator for the Bucs, and he traditionally runs a 3-4 scheme. Sounds like they'll be doing the opposite of what the Jets are doing, but still running a hybrid scheme until the personnel better fits the coordinator. Vita Vea should have a bright future as a true nose tackle here now, but they're going to need some more interior defensive linemen to play alongside him, especially with Gerald McCoy not really a fit and currently on the trade block. The most versatile defensive lineman in this class is none other than Rashawn Gary from Michigan. He's such a hard prospect to project. If this was Madden, he'd be one of the top 3 players drafted based on his physical skills. I saw an interview with him and he brought up the scheme at Michigan for one of the reasons for his lack of production, and the argument is valid, and I tend to agree with him. He played a thankless position for them. With the Bucs, he could play edge, he could play 3 technique, and he could play 5 technique in whichever scheme they were running on any given play. He'd once again be playing in quite a few thankless positions, but coaches really respect guys like that, and it could be the reason that he goes number 6 overall to the Giants instead here. So if the Bucs really want him, they probably want to take him at number 5 just to be safe, but like I said, you can't argue with this haul of picks in this draft. If Rashawn Gary is by chance gone, grab the guy that you think is going to be the best pass rusher for your hybrid scheme, or whatever one projects best to the 3-4 like Montez Sweat. The Panthers have been somewhat of an easy team to mock for in the middle of the first round this year. It's got to be a pass rusher here, and while he's not my favorite choice for them based on this scenario, there seems to be a lot of smoke around the pairing of Clemson national champion Clelin Ferrell. Apparently the Panthers have never drafted a Clemson player, and with them winning the title right down the road and the obvious need at his position, it does make sense. However, I'd be hard pressed to select him when Montez Sweat is still on the board and a better fit for the Panthers' shift towards a hybrid defense. Alright guys, I'm going to do a mid-first round intermission here. I haven't done this yet, but I want to try and shorten the intro for guys that are not interested in hearing about a bunch of channel updates and all that stuff. They just want to get to the mock draft. That's cool. I get it. But I want to still talk to my ride or dies here, and some of you have asked how you can help me continue to make NFL videos like these, and I finally made a Patreon account for you guys. It's not my style to ask for help, but I'm also not going to stand in the way if you guys want to help me prove to my wife that she can feed our newborn twins by herself once in a while so that I can continue to work on my latest YouTube video. If you want to help in another way, there is a ton of other things you can do. You can share this video with a friend, share it on social media, post it on Reddit to the NFL subreddit because I'm banned there for quote-unquote self-promotion. Also, for some reason, I made a promise to do a live stream on the Monday before the draft if the Jets 7-round mock draft hit our goal of 500 likes. I don't know why. I don't even like the Jets, but I'm a man of my word. So on April 22nd, I will jump on at nighttime, probably around 8 p.m. Eastern time, 8:30, and I'll stay on for a few hours, and we're going to run through as many teams, probably all 32 teams of a 7-round mock draft. I'm going to sit here, hang out in my little man cave, talk about the draft. I'll be super hype about it by then. We're going to be just a few days away from it on Monday night, so please stay tuned to that. I appreciate it. Let's get back to the mock draft. The Giants are now on the clock with the pick that they acquired from the Odell Beckham trade, and after going defense at number 6, the rumors have it that they're going to get either a right tackle here to solidify the offensive line, or there's this weird obsession with Daniel Jones going in the first round, and this might be it. The Giants made a tough choice last year in passing on a quarterback for Saquon Barkley, which means they probably did all of their homework on every quarterback available to make sure they weren't making a massive mistake in passing on a franchise quarterback for the most easily replaceable position in football. If there's a way for them to have their cake and eat it too, they should go for it. I cooked up a package to get them the guy that I gave them in damn near every mock draft last year. That's Josh Rosen. But the Cardinals reportedly don't want to let Rosen go for anything less than a first-round pick. They have 11 draft picks already, so if the first means that much to them, then they're going to need to throw some later picks for the Giants to soften the blow of letting go of a first-round pick like number 17. While they're at it, remember the Giants defensive coordinator was the Cardinals defensive coordinator a few years ago, and they're still trying to find pieces to fit this hybrid defense. I'm actually using the Odell Beckham trade here as an outline for this trade by adding a player that was once a high draft pick. Maybe that's Dave Gettleman's sweet spot. There's at least 2 players on this Cardinals roster that could be traded that were drafted while the defensive coordinator Betcher was with the team, and depending on who the Giants select at number 6 could determine on which player that they prefer. The 2 players that I have in mind are former first-round linebacker linebacker Hassan Reddick or former second-round defensive lineman Robert Nkemdiche. In this scenario, the Giants went Devin White, so they could ask for a piece along the defensive line that would fit this scheme, just like Robert Nkemdiche, to be included. Now, the Cardinals are on the clock here, so they passed on big needs along the trenches for Kyler Murray, but he's going to run into the same issues that Josh Rosen ran into in his rookie season, and that's the offensive line allowing constant pressure. Kyler Murray would go from one of the best offensive lines in college football in recent memory to one of the worst in the NFL, and it just so happens that one of his best friends along the offensive line is projected to go somewhere in the middle of the first round in Cody Ford. Cody Ford will also fill a huge need for them along the right side of the Cardinals offensive line, whether it be at right tackle or right guard. I was actually listening to the Stick to Football podcast. He actually said he preferred blocking for Kyler Murray to Baker Mayfield. Maybe not the most politically correct thing to say, but whatever. So it'd be fitting to get him on the Cardinals with the Browns' old first round pick. The Vikings are cap-strapped with a huge needed offensive line, so they're going to have to rely on their draft picks to fill these needs. I've been quick to give them the best offensive lineman here and just move on in all my mocks so far, but this time I'm feeling a little bit different of a move for them. Because they're limited cap-wise, they could look for a move in the draft to go and get their guy. This is a team that should have Super Bowl aspirations still, so they really only have a pick or two away from making a run here. The Vikings were also considered in the trade-up for Jonah Williams I made earlier with the Texans and Dolphins, but 2 offensive linemen have been taken since then, and reaching on a guy at this point feels very Colton Miller-ish. Speaking of the Raiders, they've been missing out on an edge rusher in the first round of a ton of non-trade scenarios that I've been running, and a guy that everyone is claiming will be a top 10 pick is still on the board in Montez Sweat. So here I've got the Raiders and Vikings swapping second round picks and first round picks, with the Vikings throwing in an extra late round pick just so they can move up from 50 to 35. It's kind of a unique move, but it's one that could work in this scenario because the Vikings are not sold on a guy at 18, whereas the Raiders would probably be willing to go up a lot more than this if Montez Sweat was available in the late teens. I really like TJ Hawkinson to the Titans if he's available at 19. In fact, I've given them an Iowa tight end in every mock draft this year because it would give this offense a little bit more of a dynamic threat in the passing game, and then that guy could take over for Delaney Walker in the future. Then I considered a trade up for more of a splash for the Titans since, you know, they're hosting the draft and all, and they want to make it exciting for the fans. But if the Cowboys, Jerry Jones himself, didn't use that as an excuse to make a splash, then that thought process might be completely off base. Instead, with the top edge rushers off the board, I have them taking a guy that has been up and down the first round of draft boards through this mock draft process in Greedy Williams. Malcolm Butler hasn't been as good as the New England version, surprise, surprise, and Adoree Jackson is a fun player, but he's not a shutdown guy, and offenses actually went out of their way to target him last year. Jackson still played well, but Greedy Williams has #1 cornerback potential and would be able to put some pressure on Malcolm Butler to play more like he did in the second half of the season than the first half, and then he also gives them a backup plan once they need to get that Butler contract off of their books in 2021. The Steelers' needs are based on who you ask. I don't believe for a second that they need to address running back or wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, and linebacker is one that they will probably avoid in the first also because as long as Ryan Shazier continues to make such great strides in his rehab, and not because they think he's going to make an actual comeback to football, but because the message it would send to him throughout this struggling time. They're doing everything right by Shazier in this process, and drafting his replacement in such a public setting would be a big blow to him, and they can get by with John Bostic and Vince Williams. Cornerback is their biggest need in my opinion, and I'm back on DeAndre Baker being a perfect fit for them, and they've even done a lot of homework on him, but they might end up drafting a guy that's projected to go in the 3rd and 4th round again, so who knows. The Seahawks are infamous for moving up and down the draft to get the guys they want, but they only have 4 picks in this draft, so a trade down is the likely route that they have to take early on in this draft. This trade really kind of irked me, and I didn't want to do it, but it just made the most sense. The Patriots have a ton of picks and are still all in from season to season here. Last mock, I had them taking a wide receiver at number 32, and then Rob Gronkowski went and retired on me. I think it was the day that I posted the mock draft. So if TJ Hawkinson, aka Baby Gronk, is still available, it would not shock me to see the Patriots move up for him, and the Seahawks would probably offer an ideal spot for them to move into. I've also been giving the Ravens a wide receiver in I think every single mock, and they've got their choice of every wide receiver not named DK Metcalf in this mock right now. But what happens when every NFL team adapts to the new spread concepts and goes small and fast on defense to try and keep up, except for one? That's what the Ravens are doing. They're building an offense that is more old school than we've seen in recent history, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. This running attack could make it really hard for teams to prep for each week. The defensive game plan would have to be switched up so drastically from what each each team does on a week-to-week basis, or this running game is just going to come in and smack them in the mouth. Now, the Chargers exposed their offense in the playoffs, but that was only after they got to see them and get smacked in the mouth before, and not everybody has the defensive personnel that they used to shut it down. And you saw what happened to the Chargers the following week against the Patriots when they had to readjust to a quarterback that did make quick reads and got the ball out before they could pressure him. They got chewed up. I could see a scenario where the Ravens just continue to reinforce the offensive line with the best center in the draft in Garrett Bradbury and just physically assert their will on defenses with the running game without needing as much scheming to get it done. It's just going to be a mano-a-mano. We're better than you at running the ball than you are at stopping it. Come and try. All right, the Dolphins are back on the clock here. Remember, they traded down with the Texans, who traded up to get Jonah Williams, and I see three options for the Dolphins here. First would be to select Christian Wilkins as the future leader of the defense and a key building block in the culture change that was promised years ago. The second option would be to sort of low-key publicly announce the tank job for 2020 with the selection of Jeffrey Simmons. Same position, won't be available for a year while he rehabs the torn ACL. The third option is to high-key announce this tank job by trading back once again for another 2020 second round pick. I'm going with option number 3 here for shits and gigs. The Rams are most certainly in win now mode and should be aggressive in this draft to get the guy they really want. They've done a lot of homework on this guy, and I think that Dexter Lawrence is going to get drafted higher than I've seen in other mock drafts, and the Rams would be such a perfect fit. Imagine a man of his size and stature playing next to Aaron Donald. When Donald's getting triple teamed, a guard and center would be tasked with blocking this 350-pound mammoth on his own. And then the Dolphins now have 3 second round picks, which would be plenty for them to probably move up from, I don't know, the 2nd or 3rd overall pick to the number 1 overall pick in 2020. All right, remember the Raiders traded up with the Vikings so that the Raiders could get Montez Sweat, and now the Vikings are back on the clock and can select their interior offensive lineman in a more appropriate spot without feeling like it was a reach. Chris Lindstrom is the guy that they've done a lot of work on. It's probably still a little high for some people's taste here, but paired with their 2nd round pick, it feels right, so just stay tuned for that before you bail out. The Eagles traded for Jordan Howard a day or two after my last mock was made, which had Josh Jacobs falling to them in the 2nd round. In my new Discord channel, you guys can go ahead and join that in the description. There's a link there. My man BDNZ made the point that I think it's officially official. No running back is going to go in the 1st round of the 2019 NFL draft. You can go ahead and book it. The Eagles were the only team that could reach on their guy, but that door is closed. The Eagles could take a defensive tackle here, but there's still quite a few on the board, and if they got offered a trade down, then they should take it. I've actually got their old buddy Andy Reid calling them up for a favor here. He was hoping that Garrett Bradbury would fall past the Ravens and he could jump up to get him if he needed to, but now he's getting nervous that the next guy on his board might get taken by another AFC contender before they're on the clock. The Chiefs need defensive help pretty bad, but if the center play on this offensive line is not up to par and the offensive line falls apart, then the entire structure of this team falls apart. There's always this surprise 1st round pick or two, and I could see a desperate scenario like this that would force Texas A&M center Eric McCoy into the 1st round. I wanted to find a scenario for a Colts trade up based purely on my own speculation because this team is really close to being the class of the AFC, but it's just not in the Chris Ballard formula for building a contender so far. It's much more likely that he sits back, lets the draft unfold in front of him, fields offers maybe for trade downs, but sticks to his board and takes the best big boy left. And by big boy, I mean somebody along the trenches because he's made a point to say that those positions are extremely valuable to him. Christian Wilkins seems like the best bet here if he makes it past the Eagles, but that patient approach could actually end up having them taking Jeffrey Simmons as plan B. The Raiders will probably go defense with at least 2 of their 3 first rounders, but don't be surprised if they grab one of the pass catchers with the 27th pick just to get their guy before the eventual run on receivers at the beginning of the 2nd round takes place. Noah Fant's actually a wide receiver in a tight end's body, and honestly I think that he should be drafted before this, but nobody is making their interest in him very obvious, so he could see himself falling into an intriguing Raiders offense here, but once again I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the top 10 before TJ Hawkinson because he has got that dynamic trait in his athleticism that Hawkinson just doesn't have, regardless of not being a complete tight end quite like his Iowa teammate. The Chargers are also contenders to trade up that I just couldn't find a partner for in this mock draft scenario. If they stay put, addressing the offensive line could be the move here if the right guy is available. Andre Dillard could see himself staying on the West Coast and giving Phillip Rivers some pass blocking help over the bums that he's got right now. They've actually spent a lot of resources on the offensive line in the past few years, so they could choose to go elsewhere and hope to get an improved return on their investment and maybe just grab best player available here. After swapping picks with the Chiefs, the Eagles are back on the clock and they can select the defensive tackle I previously had them selecting, but this time they are the 63rd overall pick, richer for risking the move down. The Eagles have one of the smarter front offices in the league, so I expect them to do something clever like this at the end of the first round, because it's a great place to kind of double your investment or turn one pick into multiples or futures. The Packers took Brian Burns with their number 12 selection, and the run on wide receivers still hasn't happened yet. You guys know how much I love predicting teams in the last few picks to trade out of the first for potentially as much as a future first round pick from the team moving up, and the Packers could turn their 2018 investment into another first round pick for 2020, and the odds of it being one of the last 3 picks in the round would probably skyrocket. If Aaron Rodgers' career wasn't dwindling away, I would expect that from this front office, even though it's a new regime, but with N'Keal Harry, Hakeem Butler, Marquise Brown, Deebo Samuel, and other top wide receivers still on the board, I think that they've got to get a weapon for Rodgers here. N'Keal Harry gets the nod for me because he can fill in Randall Cobb's role as the slot guy that can also bounce outside. Harry is going to be a slot wide receiver on steroids if he lands in a spot like this with a quarterback that can get him the ball quickly and on point for him to do work after the catch. Alright, and after the Rams traded up with the Dolphins are on the clock for the 3rd time tonight, but the 3rd time is the charm for them. They've missed out on some of the defensive tackles that I originally had in mind, but the other side of the ball is in just as much of a state of disarray. Dalton Risner is one of the offensive linemen I've had my eye on from the beginning of the draft process, and his versatility and aggressive personality would really help get this offensive line back on track. He could play anywhere they needed him, but replacing Juwan James at right tackle is probably where I'd pencil him in at in his rookie season. Alright, and the Seahawks are back on the clock after giving the damn Patriots Gronk 2.0 for a couple extra picks, and they are another team that could use this new draft slot to get a wide receiver ahead of the run that's inevitably going to take place at the beginning of day 2, especially with Doug Baldwin facing health concerns right now. But this team has never placed that high priority on drafting wide receivers, so I could see another team willing to sacrifice a pick to also get ahead of that wide receiver run. Remember that team that I said was too boring to get involved in the mock draft trades? Well, the Jaguars have an early 2nd round pick that could entice a team that's taking a conservative approach like the Seahawks, especially if they traded down once already, and then they would jump up and get their guy. The connection between Nick Foles and Alshon Jeffrey was a big reason the Eagles won the Super Bowl, but he doesn't have any of those big deep threats on this roster. Hakeem Butler would be an awesome choice for the Jaguars here, but Kelvin Harmon or JJ Arcega-Whiteside could be more conservative options for them if they stayed put at 38. Hakeem Butler just offers too much potential with a much higher ceiling and game-breaking physical abilities for me to pass on for the Jaguars here. The Cardinals are going to need another wide receiver for Kyler to throw to, so they could just go ahead and complete the Oklahoma hat trick with Marquise Brown. Even with the Devin Funchess signing, the Colts should not ignore the need at wide receiver in this draft with this 34th pick. A.J. Brown should have probably gone in the 1st round, but if he falls to the Colts, I don't know how they would pass up on him. The Vikings need to refocus their identity around the defense, and plugging in Jerry Tillery to replace Sheldon Richardson is a good option here. As we get closer to the draft, it becomes apparent that Tillery is not going to be available with their original 2nd round pick as I previously mocked, so I think that getting him at 35 is the safe option. The 49ers love them some Deebo Samuel, and he fills a huge need too. This pick just makes sense, and like I said, here goes that run on wide receivers with 3 out of the first 4 picks of the 2nd round. The Giants waited on that right tackle, and he fell to them in the 2nd round in David Edwards. Greg Little has been up and down, but the Seahawks are a good fit for him after trading down here. They need to stop playing around with this offensive line and just go ahead and solidify it. In the Bucs' new hybrid defense, Mack Wilson's actually going to be better suited than Quan Alexander to play inside linebacker. Irv Smith is just one more weapon for Josh Allen, and then the Bills can shift towards addressing the defense a little more. The centers in this draft are really good, and Elgton Jenkins is just one of the more underrated ones. And the Broncos are going to need a new center after letting theirs walk in free agency, so they've got to reach on this guy here to make sure he doesn't fall through the cracks. When you have a type, you have a type. Daniel Jones could carry the 2nd round, middle of the pack quarterback torch for Andy Dalton and allow the Bengals to have another decade of mediocrity. It's perfect. Taylor Rapp continues to help the secondary makeover for the Lions here. I'm not sure if you would consider this doubling down or maybe tripling down or probably actually quadrupling down on the defensive line, but the scheme versatility would be unmatched and give the Packers a lot of really young, solid pieces to build this defense around. So the Lions fans that didn't turn this video off after trading down for a cornerback and not an edge rusher should be a little happier that they turned the 8th pick into Byron Murphy and Chase Winovich. Justin Lane is a fast riser in the draft and would give the Buccaneers a big cornerback with great ball skills because they don't really have one of those. Nazir Adderley would be a steal for the Panthers at this point in the draft, and it's such a perfect fit. Kelvin Harmon could be everything the Dolphins wished for in Devontae Parker. The Browns get a young, raw offensive tackle in Yadni Kajus to groom for a year or two and let these other two guys duke it out to see who's the best of the best. It took 50 picks for a running back to come off the board, but the Raiders and Josh Jacobs just feel destined for each other. They need a dynamic wide receiver, and if they don't take one earlier, then a guy like Paris Campbell in the second would give them that missing element from this offense, which would open things up for their running game a lot. Ja'Kai Polite is a top 15 talent on film, but lost his way somewhere during this draft process. The Steelers, they understand what he's going through right now, and these two, they just need each other. The injury issues that plagued the Eagles secondary last year, a defensive back with the versatility of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson would be able to fill in wherever they needed him the most. Bradley Roby was a nice pickup for the Texans, but they still need to address the secondary, and Amani Aruware matches up well with the new big wide receivers in the AFC South. Whoa, Will Greer to the Dolphins, but I thought they were tanking for a quarterback in 2020. But hold on, pump the brakes here. I think that this could be a Deshaun Kaiser situation with the Browns. It gives the fan base some hope. It gives the franchise a guy that could potentially come in and wow them and end up actually being their franchise quarterback. Or he could fail miserably, help them land a top 5 pick, and then get traded the next offseason to a team that also saw potential in him this year. I'm a huge fan of Zach Allen and his potential to be a mini JJ Watt, so naturally he's going to end up in a place like New England, right? Riley Ridley would give the Eagles another big target for Carson Wentz because something just wasn't right about him last year, and they're going to need to go ahead and do this weapons overhaul that they did the year he looked like an MVP. You guys know I'm a huge fan of Juan Thornhill to the Cowboys. He'd give them a center fielder that would allow Xavier Woods to play more in the slot, and the safety position has plagued them for it seems like years. The Colts secondary got by with some spare parts last year. Julian Love is a player they've shown interest in, and this is a spot where they'd have to take him. The Chargers let Jason Verrett walk in free agency, and Rocky Sin could come in and fill his role. The Chiefs' defense might be worse in 2019 than it was in 2018, but they still need to reach on some pressure players in the draft here to just try and solidify things. Jalen Ferguson never should have run that 3-cone. Terry McLaurin and Michael Thomas would be a nice duo of second-round Ohio State wide receivers for the Saints. He'd allow them to move on from Ted Ginn if Ginn's body won't hold up anymore, too. LJ Collier would give the Eagles another big defensive end to rotate in. Here I've got the Seahawks taking a flyer on O'Shane Ximines just in case this Frank Clark situation ends poorly. To start the third round with the pick acquired in the Josh Rosen trade, I've got the Giants selecting Jonathan Abram to replace Landon Collins as the Giants box safety. Darrell Henderson is my favorite running back in this class and would pair with James Conner as a nice change of pace back for the Steelers. The Shanahan zone blocking scheme doesn't work without healthy, reliable offensive linemen, and Connor McGovern fits the scheme and blocks for some good running backs at Penn State. I mocked Michael Dieter to the Jets in my 7-round mock draft, so go check that out after this. This Jaguars offense would look completely different after this draft if they added Dawson Knox after Jawan Taylor and Hakeem Butler. Gerald Willis with Rashawn Gary and Vita Vea gives the Bucs a 3-man front to begin their shift away from the 4-3. Bradley Roby left via free agency, but the Broncos pass rush should make it an easy replace with a guy like Trayvon Mullen. The Bengals are going to give Bobby Hart a chance to get Andy Dalton killed, but Titus Howard has potential to come in and block for the next guy at least. Why do all the best value picks fall into the Patriots' lap? JJ Arcega-Whiteside was a first-round pick for me in early mock. If he's still available in the third, man, this is a steal. The Bills need more pass rush from the defensive tackle position, and Draymond Jones has ideal traits. He just needs the right coaching to get it out of him consistently, and I think that Sean McDermott and the Bills' defensive coaching staff is the place to do that. The Packers passing on TJ Hawkinson at number 12 overall and landing Jay Sternberger in the third is exactly why you don't take a tight end early. Not saying that they're comparable players, but the drop-off isn't 2 rounds worthy, in my opinion. The Bucs might not want to neglect the offensive line this long, but they had to address one of the worst defenses in the league first. Max Sharping is a small school offensive lineman, but would offer them a lot of flexibility and could eventually be their starting left tackle if needed. The Panthers have a need along the offensive line as well, but they like their guys that they've got on the roster. Bobby Evans offers swing depth and could allow them to shuffle guys around in case of injury. The Dolphins are quietly killing this draft here, and DeAndre Walker is a guy I would assume Bill Belichick would be interested in, so sure, Brian Flores might see his chess piece abilities also. Deontay Thompson has seen a steep decline in his draft value, but he is a value pick at this point for the Falcons. The Browns could easily replace Jabril Peppers with a guy like Darnell Savage and not skip a beat. Isaiah Johnson is a classic Mike Zimmer pick here for the Vikings. He is filling a future need with a raw talent before it becomes a glaring need. Kalen Saunders would be a great nose tackle for the Titans and take some pressure off of Jarrell Casey. Andy Isabella fits the Steelers' wide receiver mold to a T and would give them a speed threat that they've been lacking for quite some time. The Seahawks defense needs more backup linebackers for Bobby Wagner, who seems to get injured every other season nowadays. The Ravens reload on defense like no other team in the league, and now they have an opening for a guy named Max with 2 X's on their roster, after moving on from Max Williams, the tight end. The Texans' offensive line can't take all the blame for the lack of a consistent running game. Justice Hill gives them an option to move on from Lamar Jackson and that massive contract of his sooner than later. The Bears giving fellow NFC contender a starting running back for cheap still doesn't make much sense to me, but the Bears like Travion Williams to replace him, so with their first pick in the draft, they're probably going to have to go running back. Emmanuel Hall is a big wide receiver that can play slot, and Matthew Stafford really saw his production drop off after the Lions traded Golden Tate. Chuma Edoga is going to provide some team with so much offensive line flex. He could probably start for the Colts at right guard over Mark Glowinski, and left tackle Anthony Costanzo's contract expires after the season, so he could potentially start at right guard this year and then move over to left tackle next season if he's that good. The Cowboys have been lacking a deep speed threat in this offense for like a decade. Tavon Austin will never be the guy he was at West Virginia, even if he stays healthy for all 16 games. Mecole Hardman gives them that jolt that they need and could play some slot wide receiver for them. Tyrell Williams was always physically impressive, but it didn't always translate on the field with the Chargers, so let's try again with Miles Boykin. The Chiefs draft so far, I'll be honest, I'm not impressed, but picking up Joejuan Williams in the third would be great value for them. I had the Jets double dipping on offensive line in the third of my 7-round mock, but they had to settle for Caleb McCary in this one. Jawan Taylor, Hakeem Butler, Dawson Knox, and now Miles Sanders. The Jaguars are building Nick Foles a squad to play with. The Giants still need more edge rushers that can play in space for their hybrid defense. Ben Benogu would be an ideal fit for them in the 3rd round. The Washington Crimson Tide picks up another one of their own at a position of need in Christian Miller. The only concern about this guy is, will he ever be able to stay healthy? Blake Cashman might be the biggest riser of the entire draft after his combine and just seems like a Bill Belichick kind of guy. Somehow the Patriots just keep winning in this draft. The Seahawks finally addressed their need at wide receiver with a guy with some size and some speed in a small school prospect like Anthony Johnson. Much like the Chiefs, the Rams can't allow their offense to hit bumps on the road due to the offensive line. Ben Powers offers some interior depth to ease the transition from Roger Saffold. The Panthers pick up their 2nd and the 4th Oklahoma offensive lineman in this draft just to reinforce their running game and solidify that offensive line. Anthony Nelson would give the Seahawks a better option at left defensive end than Quentin Jefferson, and now this gives them 2 edge rushing prospects to play on both sides of their defense. And then finally, Damian Harris might seem like a redundant pick after the Mark Ingram signing, but it just further solidifies their power running game as the offensive identity here in Baltimore and gives them a stable of guys that are all capable of shouldering the load on any given day. That's going to do it for my 3-round mock draft with trades rumor edition. I appreciate you guys for staying to the end. Once again, don't forget, we are going to do a live stream on Monday, April 22nd around 8:30, 9:30, somewhere in between there, Eastern time. I'm going to be running through 7-round mock drafts for all 32 teams. Production value won't be quite as high as this. It's one of my first times doing that, so it's going to be kind of a learning process. I might do one earlier in the day as a test run to make sure I don't screw it up in the prime time segment. Hopefully you guys will check that out. Once again, don't forget, we have a massive goal of 3,000 likes on this video. Please, please, please help me reach that goal. It goes way farther than you guys could even comprehend when helping me support this channel and growing this channel and whatnot. I appreciate everything you guys have done. I appreciate you watching to the end. Thank you guys once again for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. I will see you all in the next video.